Hello and welcome back to this module about grant budgeting basics. We are moving through our sections, and after just talking about direct and indirect cost expenses, we're now talking about matching and cost share. Matching and cost share are a unique element of grant application budgets that are not required by all grant makers. When we talk about matching and cost share, this is where grant makers are thinking about, are their funds being leveraged? That's a great way to think about it. How are you leveraging the grant dollars to round out the full support for a project or program's cost? When we think about what matching and cost share mean, the best and easiest source of matching in particular is if we're thinking about cash. I don't mean that you actually have the cash money in hand, but if there is money that has been received from a foundation, from a donor, that is available to be used as match. It was received, it's in the bank account, it could be proven that it has supported the expenses for a project or program. That is the easiest source of match that you could have to then report on to a grant maker. Now, to be clear, that match, if it's federal funding, you can't use federal sources to match federal dollars. But there's a lot of other options for where you might be securing matching funds from. If it's federal funding, maybe you're using state or local funding or other foundations or individuals. Maybe you're using that form of revenue to support the matching cost. But cash is king when it comes to matching. When we look at our guidelines, whether it's a single website page or a 125-page PDF guideline, it's a great idea to do a search and find, a Control F. Read specifically for the words matching or cost share. If you do not meet matching or cost share requirements, your application is a really rapid no, and your application won't even be reviewed or scored. So you want to first, when you're reading the guidelines, before you get deep into any of those program design elements, or before you sit down and start translating your budget to their budget template, before you do any of that, make sure you understand if there's a matching or cost share requirement, and think about how will you gather that support? Where is it that you will get matching and cost share support from? How will you prove that you have it? Is it possible for your organization? Quite frankly, matching and cost share requirements are a common reason that an applicant organization might put down a set of guidelines and choose not to apply. Now, in this example on the screen, it's a solicitation that requires a 25% cash or in-kind match. That's not an uncommon burden. On the other hand, just recently, I was reading a set of guidelines from a state agency that had an 80% cash or in-kind match. That is a significant burden for the applicant organization. That means the state agency was only going to contribute, would only award up to 20% of the project cost. That leaves a huge gap for the grant-seeking organization to secure. And for some organizations, they say that's too much. We can't do that. So think about what the percent of burden is and have an honest conversation with your leadership. Can we commit to this or not? Looking at the match percentage and agreeing to it, quite frankly, is something that never belongs only on the shoulders of the grant writer or grant professional. Now, as we're reading those guidelines, when we find our matching or cost share requirement, we want to carefully seek out any calculation information. Here on this screen is one such example. This comes from an EPA grant application, a set of guidelines that was available. And that's a very weighty paragraph talking about matching funds. That's a pretty clear indicator that there is a unique calculation behind the way that they look at matching funds. What they have detailed is that the matching funds must be at least 25% of the total cost of the grant project. And they have given very clear guidelines on how you calculate so that you are not all of a sudden ineligible as a result. Okay, so we want to have multiple people triple checking that we are calculating our match the way that it is described in the guidelines so that we do not quickly become an automatic no. We want to be sure that our work is still reviewed and scored and we are being considered for the grant. So it's not quite as simple as how much text is there about matching funds to how complex might the formula be, but it's a pretty good indicator that you need to be very careful. Now here is a question that often comes up about match. Well, I see what the burden is. What if instead of having 25% match, we have 30% match? That'll make us more competitive, right? No, not in federal grant programs and not in state programs where the money comes from the federal government. Because according to the Code of Federal Regulations, see the symbol again in front of the numbers, 200.306? According to the Code of Federal Regulations, voluntary committed cost sharing is not expected and cannot be used as a factor during merit review of applications or proposals. So it won't help your score. But if you show that you will provide that much match, that's what they'll hold you to, they being your awarding agency. Well, what if no matching is required? It's a straight up no requirement, no cost share required, and we have, or we think we might have, matching funds to commit to the project. That would make us more competitive, right? No, same thing. It points us right back to the Code of Federal Regulations 200.306. We want our cost share and our matching information in our budget to be truthful to our best anticipated plan, but we do not want to overpromise on the hope that it would make us more competitive. That is actually not the truth and instead is creating a greater burden for your organization. Now, cost share and matching are just one small component of the budget section of a grant application, but as I indicated, can carry a lot of weight because if miscalculated, your proposal could go right out of the pile for consideration. So if you have any questions or concerns about how do you calculate this, what are you looking at in the guidelines, what is the actual burden, please feel free to reach out. My direct email is diane@dhleonardconsulting.com. Now we are more than halfway through our grant budgeting module. I look forward to seeing you in our next section as we continue the conversation.